organisations and internally with business, mostly from an HR perspective, walking through change, whether it occurs from a market fragmentation level or responding to regulatory change, for example, and also sharing some insights around M&A activity and what we've learned from them. So I've had work experience, I guess, both from the internal and consulting side. So what we'll do today is we'll just take you through in about half an hour some key themes that I think might be relevant as obviously organisations and community councils in particular are undertaking change at the moment. So some of the three key things that the themes that I'm going to weave through the session today are around taking an active approach to change. So I think, helping to talk about the context of change by using some frameworks that we're familiar with to understand, well, why is it and what's happening and how do we respond to that, and how do we take a proactive approach in understanding the change, how it impacts us, and trying to take measures and approaches to work through that successfully. I'll also talk a bit about the role of leaders and councillors in helping their employees and workforce mobilise through change. And also thirdly, as I mentioned previously, just talking a bit about some M&A activity and lessons that we've learned around getting that right, or as right as we possibly can, as we're working through acquisition or amalgamation activity as in this case.
There's a strong correlation between mergers and acquisitions in the private sector to the mergers that are occurring in local government at the present time, but also that local government is going through regulatory change at the present time with the update of the Act, and there's further tranches of change going through the Local Government Act in the upcoming months. So it's about how we adapt to that.
So first of all, I'll take you through a model that we use here at Aon Hewitt in our consulting work. And it looks a bit busy on first glance, but the key thing that I wanted to share is how we can try and understand change. So the first row of dots or bubbles, circles that you see there, this is what we understand around some of the triggers around change. So it can range from things around corporate transactions to strategic transformation going on in the business, responding to market need or a change in digitisation, for example. It could also look like functional transformation, so when you might find that you have a function splitting into two different areas or multiple areas, or if in fact you might have an amalgamation of functions as well that causes change internally. We also see restructuring, a lot of restructuring, obviously, particularly around the GFC, and also now as we're consolidating the market. And it can also relate to change dealing with workforce strategies, a change in culture, or particular programs that you might be implementing into the organisation or council. So that could look, for example, like an engagement improvement program. So I'm not sure if many of you are conducting engagement surveys or have a focus on culture and engagement change, but often we see that particular program of action to improve operational and cultural levers would constitute what we'd say as a program implementation. So looking at all of these different triggers as being the reason why organisations and councils would focus on managing change as a robust program. Now the second line, or the middle line, is where it really connects to the individual, and obviously no change is successful unless you connect with the people that it impacts and you bring them on that journey with you. So the four key areas that we suggest are so critically important in getting right is the employees' understanding of the change, why are they doing it, what's happening, where are we going, how does it impact me and my job. Then looking at the emotion, and this is really where this is the driver of organisational change, the effectiveness of change, is how you connect with the individual and bring them on the journey with you, what it means for them, understanding their reactions, both positive and negative, and working with them to bring them into a better place or help support them as they work towards the future.
Yeah, I suppose the big thing is with councils, I mean, a lot of employees at councils have been working there for a very long time, and change brings the threats and opportunities and the like. But obviously there's a lot of emotion evokes through the process, and if that is poorly managed, then we'll find that we have disenfranchised.
And it's not an area typically that people speak a lot about. Often because it's the workplace, people might not bring their true selves to the workplace, and they may not speak openly about, you know, how change is emotionally impacting them. So we really, you know, we look at the peers as support groups, and also particularly the leaders, to really try and connect with the individual on a, you know, to an extent an emotional level, to try and uncover, well, what's lying beneath that individual or a team, to help unlock, well, what's really happening for you and how can we work together to adjust it. The third part is around ability. So this is where it's really, you know, having the employees or the workforce knowing what's required of them and how to achieve what's required of them. So if, for example, you're going through a restructure, or people have to take on additional responsibilities through a change, then you want to make sure that they're very well equipped with the information to take on new responsibilities, or they're getting the right coaching, or they have the tools and infrastructure to support them in that. So obviously, you know, you can find people like a deer in headlights, for example, or everything comes to a grinding halt if they're mobilised towards this change, but don't have the tools to get there. So that's also very important. And finally, the last one is around intent or motivation, if you like. So you could have, you know, people understanding the reason for change. They're pretty much emotionally connected to it and see value in it. They can see that they've got the capacity and the capability to deliver on the change, but why do it? And I think this is another critical one around, is this what I want directionally in my career and for my workplace? Is this something that's going to be motivational for me over the longer term or the short term? So being really clear with people around not just what's in it for them, but how can they bring their best self to work and align to what the organisation or the council is trying to achieve.
I suppose that's really important when it's imposed on you. I mean, a lot of these mergers that have occurred in councils, and we'll touch on those in a sec, but you know, the mergers that have occurred in councils have been imposed on the organisation, and I think some people within council might feel a little bit lost around that, and not understanding why are we really doing this? You know, is it going to be something that's going to stick around, or is it going to be unwound? I mean, a lot of these questions in the employee's mind particularly, and how we actually move ahead in terms of getting the rubber on the road, actually making this work. There's desire to make it work.
Absolutely. Where it is really clear that if the change is imposed on you or on the council, that the leaders have such a significant role to play in really defining, well, what does this mean for us? And I think, you know, we talk about positive mindset or resilience, and what we see in organisations that leverage the change for opportunity and grow and accelerate their success, I guess, in working through that change. They have leaders that are really focusing on what's the opportunity for us. So there is a very, very positive mindset around, okay, this is the change, it's going to happen, we can't do anything about it, but what we can do is manage how we react to it and the way that we respond. So one of the councils, so we work with a number of councils in our here at Practice and Talent Performance Consulting, and there's one in particular that stands out where they've really embraced the change and they've focused on, you know, all the benefits that it brings to them. And they discuss the downside, but they really weigh that up with the opportunity it presents, and they connect the individuals with the vision and the mission of the council, and how that change actually can reinforce what they're trying to achieve, and they then connect their people with that shared purpose and mission. So it's really important that leaders are playing that role. The bottom row of circles there, that leadership is critically, you know, on that left-hand side, one of the biggest influences of change. So getting the message right from the top is so important. And what we see with these, we call them the common, you know, levers for change, and this is where we take more of an organisational, internal view at operation. What can you be doing in councils to really build momentum for the change? And we look at levers including leadership, how you're stakeholders are managed, communication that's running through the business to continually share and update around how things are progressing, sharing the wins, and measuring progress that you're making operationally and through your people. And the enablers, which is around having the right organisational structure to support the new business or the new look of the council, making sure that you've got the right staffing capability and capacity, that your policy and processes are aligned with the new entity, or that you're recreating a shared entity, and also critically that your performance and rewards is reflective of the behaviours and the demonstrated activity you want to be seeing from people.
So do I see that we're talking about, you know, the vision and the drive from the leaders of the organisation, and then the other end is the tools that you use to deliver that.
Yeah.
You know, the tools are, you know, building your structure and getting the capacity right within the organisation. But the key thing, what really resonates with me is sitting around the leadership. If the leaders are ambivalent or they're not wedded to the change, then the whole thing falls over.
Correct. Yes. So we want, absolutely, and this is where you get support teams from HR, for example, that are critical in supporting your leaders in sharing what the overall communication is, making sure that there's a shared platform for determining structure and how you would then prepare your workforce around that. Next.
Okay, so we're having a slide issue. Sorry about that. Here we go.
All right. So this is, I guess, another framework that helps us understand about culture in a framework that we call the alignment framework. So we've just looked at a slide that helps us understand change and how that occurs. This is now looking at culture, because obviously what we see when there are merging enterprises or organisations, or when organisations are responding to change, often it comes with that question around, well, what happens to our culture? Is there any difference to how we're going to go about things? Because that will have a huge impact on how people feel about that change and the behaviours that they then need to show.
Especially when there's two organisations joined up. I mean, you get two cultures. And, I mean, I worked in a council where after an amalgamation, we still saw employees of the council wearing the badge of the former council, or the branded uniform of the former council, and that did a lot to destabilise, you know, the cultural, you know, cohesion and developing a really strong culture amongst the new organisation.
Sure, and I think you've got to be clear of the leadership team. The leaders of the entity need to be very clear about their messaging on what is our strategy, how we're going to, what are we trying to achieve as a combined entity. And this is where, again, looking at our M&A activity, getting this very clear at the very beginning. You have the people, the vision, but also the operational drivers around what does it mean for us to be a shared entity, and clearly communicate that through the organisation so that people know what they're going to continue, what they need to do more of, and what they also need to let go of. And that can be where the real pain of change can come about, because people, you know, if they've been working for an organisation for a period of time, they become part of that organisation. So you're asking somebody to lose a part of their entity in some respect. So understanding what that change, the impact that has on the personal level, obviously is very important.
Does that relate to things like changes in reporting lines and changes in geographic location of individuals within the organisation? Really pragmatic stuff.
Yeah, I think, you know, any change, whether it be about a different reporting line or having to work with different colleagues, or, you know, if your market or your community is working across then a different scope, it means that people have to adjust to things that they may not know about, things they may not be familiar with. They may have ingrained ways of operating that have worked for them that they might need to change. So it's really asking people to stop and reevaluate who they are, what they're doing and why, and bringing them to another place of, okay, we've got to wipe the slate clean and recreate, I guess, what that workplace is going to right for them. So in this slide, I just wanted to highlight around that the linkage between being really clear on your objectives and how that relates to your community strategic plan, being clear about how you drive value for the community, and then that should be informing the operating environment or the culture that you're creating. So if you're a shared entity, being really clear about what are the differences in the entities that we had in the past, and then what do we need to create in terms of what's the future we need to be to deliver to our stakeholders, and that should inform the cultural attributes that you want to be seeing in your organisation as well. And finally, we look at the levers for change. So again, those enablers to build momentum and also to accelerate people as they go through change. So this is what misalignment looks like, and I think, it's chaos. And look, through the studies that we've done, we've found that at any point in time, around 2/3 of organisations, businesses and councils are undergoing a state of flux or change or chaos. And it's luckily an ecosystem where you're constantly trying to find this equilibrium, and that's what we call the alignment that organisations and businesses are trying to get to. So any one point in time, there is so many different external and internal forces that are disrupting your workplace, that ranging from economic trends to changes in technology, social demographics, might be regulation, market consolidation, digitisation. But also internally we can see change impacted by a change in leaders, or change in leadership, or the responsiveness to adjusting to where an organisation is. It's not uncommon to feel in a state of chaos, but what we do see is this constant need to be agile and resilient in the face of change. So just a bit of insight. This slide here talks around some of the cultural research that we've done, and it's coming out of the US actually, where we conducted some research across a multitude of organisations that we work with and compared them to the Standard & Poor's 500. So it may not be as relevant to council, but certainly looking from an organisational perspective what high performance and high performing cultures look like. So I just thought I'd touch upon it because I do see some similarities in the different entities.
I think organisations are organisations, be it government or private sector, and I think if we can take learnings from the private sector, then absolutely we'll apply them. We'll be becoming more commercial in the way councils are being run at the present time, so I think it's particularly relevant.
So what we've found is for those organisations that dropped out of the high performing list or were not able to achieve sustainability over time, some of the cultural attributes that we highlighted or that were highlighted were around being very short-term oriented, so not having that longer-term view, quite indecisive, so lack of clarity means that decisions weren't being made quickly and effectively. They were very reactive, secretive and closed, so you get a lot of business units working in isolation and people not sharing the bad news as well as the good to try and overcome it, and very much task-oriented or tick the box to be safe type of behaviour rather than being more innovative and going outside the square to recreate what they need to be. So if we were then to look at, well, what were the attributes around high-performing organisations, this is where we started to develop this culture diagnostic model. So you can see there with the blue circle the attributes that we found are present in the high-performing and highly sustainable organisations was that they were open and transparent, very proactive, growth-focused, decisive and people-oriented. So they saw people at the heart of what they did, very clear about being clear about where they were going in their future, their decisions supported and reinforced that, and they were always taking an active and adaptive approach to how they adjusted to change and were transparent around when they get it right, but also when they get it wrong, things need to be adjusted.
It's interesting because I think when organisations change, we get focused on a lot of the more functional aspects of that rather than the human side of it. So being people-oriented is very interesting in terms of that is one of the triggers for success.
Yeah, and you can't always just say, just do it. If think if we think of, you know, in the past, you're perhaps more of a command and control type of style or quite a hierarchical style of leadership, and decision making was just get on and do it. This is what you need to do. And I think especially with changing demographics in the workforce as well, there really is a need to be more collaborative, but having a shared understanding of what that looks like and getting support from people around you and your leaders, but also being proactive individually to say, well, I'm not feeling comfortable about this, and being active in doing something about it.
Absolutely.
So just in summary, that the rest of this slide is really talking about how primary strategy can really take a direction culturally on how what your cultural organisation culture looks like. So you can see there from if you have a customer or community focus, some of the attributes that we saw coming out of those businesses with those primary strategies, we saw they were very decisive and open, transparent again. They had more of a long-term orientation and were action-oriented to be delivering to the customer. So not just saying what they were going to do, but really backing it up with actions.
I think all of those strategies have relevance to local government. It's just what the driver is for your particular council, I suspect. Yeah. You know, whether you really want to drive innovation within the council, or you want to focus on, you know, managing costs and building sustainability, financial sustainability.
And this is where you might, so lack of clarity on those or having competing priorities means that then sometimes decision making can become a lot more complex. So are we making a call on being delivering to the customer, or are we looking at the cost of delivery? So being clear about the framework of how you're going to make decisions on the output for the community or the customer versus how much it's going to cost, and being really open about when you're getting to a bottleneck, I guess, or a conflict with some of the decisions that you might need to be making.
So you've got to know what your objective is.
Know what your objective is, know where those pressure points are as well, and have good governance in place to say, okay, we're struggling with this decision, which way to go, let's bring the right people in the room to talk about what this issue is and make a decision and have a framework to make a decision.
Okay.
So just to recap then around you know, looking not just at research by Aon Hewitt, because we know that we're not the only experts in the world. I've drawn on some research information from the Australian Government around their organisational resilience health check, and also Corporate Executive Board have some good research as well around organisational agility. And the key themes that I wanted to clarify or to bring to the attention of the audience were around that sense of, you know, resilience really being about having an active approach individually. Also the leaders are role modelling this and supporting people. So being proactive about, well, what does this change mean for the organisation? What does it mean for me? And how can I find opportunity in that? Empowering employees to talk about what the issues are, to help each other overcome challenges, and not have that that common theme of it's, you know, that us and them around, oh, it's the manager's problem or the leader's problem. Actually, it's a shared problem. So how do you work together to be interdependent as you move through change?
So how do the employees get a voice in that process? So how do you, if you might be a customer service officer, or you might be in your outdoor staff, how do you get heard?
So some of the key mechanisms that we look at are surveys being quick, obviously, and have a series of questions, and we like the engagement surveys that we do. I'd also recommend targeted focus groups, so either led by somebody internally, cross-functional teams, or having an objective facilitator to have these discussions where people can raise their voices and be listened to.
Okay.
But the key thing is not just that they're listened to, but things are done, that actions are taken on the back of getting that information and insight. So, you know, on the back of any survey or on the back of any focus group, that you're really clear about what the priorities, where the issues are, what the priority is going to be, and delivering a program of work that needs to address those.
So to do that, would you, I mean, you might come back and reschedule meetings or focus groups or whatever to capture what you've actually achieved and bring that back to the audience.
Yep, we're constantly measuring progress that we're making over time, communicating the wins, celebrating the wins, but also when you're not making as much progress as that you want to, that you're clear about that, you're communicating that as well, and what actions you're taking to address that.
Okay.
And just briefly, I'll take you through this slide, which helps us understand culture a bit better as well. So, as you're moving to possibly different working environments, different ways of working, the way that we look at culture is this environment of people's beliefs, so what they believe about the entity, the vision of the council in the future, for example. What is it about their values and the brand that's important to the individual? Then what are the behaviours that they're seeing that reinforce the culture they need to create around, are we indeed community focused? Are we transparent in our dealings so that people can trust us? So looking for those types of styles and behaviours in business. And then thirdly, around that governance structure or the way decisions are being made. So are we really putting the community at the heart of our business, or are we putting costs in our organisation? And what is the implication of that? Is it aligned with culture, or is it counterproductive? Okay. And again, looking at leadership as one of the three key drivers or enablers of change. So you see leaders as probably the most significant influencer of change, and then we look at people programs like reward recognition programs, for example, and then enabling infrastructure like systems and tools and practices to help people move through that change.
If I ask a question about obstacles that might present themselves. So what if there is a disenfranchised workforce that sits there, and they're very resistant to the change? How do we get over that?
So I think that's where lead to this stage of readiness or acceptance. So where I've worked on a number of assignments where we just want it to move and it's not moving. So really getting to the heart, more often than not, it comes down to an individual or groups of individuals that just aren't in that place of, they might understand it, but they don't have an emotional connection to it and they don't have the intent to change. There's something in there that's stopping them from finding opportunity in this new way of operating or the new way of being. So it would really come down to the heart of, well, what is it that's the barrier for you? Is it personal? Is it something that can be managed, or is it something that can't be managed? And I think sometimes change actually causes people to make a decision around, is this right for them? And if it's not, that's being addressed in a way that's dignified to everyone involved and saying, well, actually, this new way of operating may not be the best thing for you. And if you don't want to be part of it, you don't have to be, but let's manage that in a civilised and mature way, which means that we both come out the other end with a sense of respect for each other.
Yeah, absolutely.
Now this slide just talks about, again, going back to our research indicating how important senior leaders are, particularly through change, that they're giving strategic clarity, that they're visible and talking with people and really getting to the grassroots of what's happening in the organisation and having that focus on people. Keep moving through. Because I know there was a request for a theme around leadership being so important, and what we have found again in our research is that whilst there's such a huge or significant responsibility of leaders, we find they don't always have the skills.
That's a scary number, isn't it? 83%.
Yeah.
Wow.
And that they're the biggest challenge, perhaps holding people back around and realising accelerating change is that leaders may have the best intent, but they're not equipped to be able to lead people through change. So things that I'd recommend are, as you're going through change, really working with your leaders to understand their competence and their confidence in dealing with change, and looking at programs around, having conversations with individuals, having the difficult conversations, making sure that they're clear in, how their team responds to the change, what the impact is, and how they support their workforce through that. So really important that you're working with your HR team, for example, to ensure your leaders feel equipped and confident to deliver the change. Now this slide is just in relation to some of the engagement survey data that we have at Aon Hewitt. So we do survey with a number of councils, a broad variety of councils around Australia, and what we found is that engagement in general is slightly lower than our average in Australia, so there's certainly opportunity there. Some of the key things that we look at in terms of what could councils focus on to improve engagement. Because obviously engagement is about employee motivation and that desire and willingness to strive and contribute with that extra effort, which obviously helps productivity in so those areas that we see can help that councils need to work on improving in particular, or the common drivers to improve, so that kind of khaki colour there, around career opportunities, communication,
This one here.
that's right, brand alignment, the reputation of the organisation, and focus on learning and development. And as I think about the extent of change that councils are going through now, or in the next few years, the things that really stand out for me there are around communication. So if you weren't good at communication before, you absolutely need to be focusing on this as you're going through change. So knowing that it's a weak point, you've got to really overextend on that. Also brand alignment, so being really clear about what's important to you as an organisation and delivering that to your community and to your people, and learning and development. So that focus on growth, and that people are probably going to be hungry for having capability and skills in the new entity, but also the skills to be able to adjust to that new environment, and I include leaders in that too. So there are three things that I'd really focus on as knowing there are a weak spot that you really need to improve on as you go through change. Right, so I've spoken a lot about some structures and frameworks and research. I think getting to the heart of some questions, or the comments you were making, David, around what happens when you get stuck, what's behind that, and it really, I think it does come down quite often to the personal level, and having that the individual be ready for change. So what we do hear a lot of is that people just, more often than not, they're not ready. It's that sense of we've changed before, it doesn't work, and it's kind of futile. We've been through here before, we'll just ride the wave and see how we go. It's a very passive way of responding to the change. I don't get
not uncommon.
No.
A lot of people say, I can outlive my boss. I'll survive my boss. I'll stay here.
Let's see how this person survives.
Yeah, that's it.
Yeah. So, you get this cynicism kicking in, and then it breeds more contempt because, obviously peers are talking as well. So what we need to try and do is curb this spiral, this downward spiral of, I don't know what's happening to me, things aren't clear, I don't know what the new world's going to look like, it's going to be terrible. So really looking at the language that individuals are using, and to try and give you an idea of where people's emotions are sitting.
Okay.
And then being more proactive about responding to why this change will work and what's your role in making it work. So bringing that accountability to individuals, not just leaders as well.
That then get trying to co-opt champions within the organisation, or?
Yeah, absolutely needs to be shared. It's something that leaders do, but it's about empowering the teams to say, well, okay, this is the new world. How can you make it work for you? What are some of the things that you've seen haven't worked in the past in the old entity that you think would be really important for the new entity? What do we lose, but what do we gain? What can we build? And that's coming back to the original slide around change and that connection with the individual.
Okay.
And importantly, and in that last point around leaders, if leaders aren't self-aware enough around how they're responding to the change, that can really impact their team. So if there are any leaders on the audience, I think the key is that be really clear about how you are responding to the change and how you're finding opportunity so that you can role model resilience through it.
Okay. Leaders are a key part of it, aren't they? It won't succeed without good leadership.
Yeah. Okay, and finally, just to talk through some other lessons learned from M&A. So we spoke a little bit about engagement and how important it is to have an empowered and engaged workforce. And this is some research that was undertaken in the US through 2009-2010 when they're at the heart of, or at the core of the GFC responding to that. So during the financial crisis, we saw a lot of M&A activity, we saw a lot of restructuring and transformation. And what we found, what these charts show essentially, is that the more engaged employees were, the more resilient they were to change. So the engaged, whilst engagement didn't necessarily increase, it decreased less. And for those people who were disengaged, actually the changes were more disengaging. So the takeout from this is, number one, a highly engaged workforce is going to help in productivity and resilience in general. But if you're going through significant change, it's so important to be bringing your people with you in a positive and empowered way to reinforce engagement as you're going through the change. again, going back to that personal level, this is just an individual change curve that we often find useful in talking with leaders around what's the impact of change to individuals and teams. So being aware that you're going to get a period of time where you're going to be in a bit of a drop. So the key is, how do you address that drop, empathise with people as they're responding to that change and trying to figure it out, and working with them to move through that valley of, I can't see a future for me, or this new environment just doesn't connect with me, or I don't like how we're operating, how we're going to operate, and working with them to either let go of that and build a new future, or let go and take a different direction.
It's almost like transitioning through, you see people transition through grief and the various emotions they feel, very similar thing.
Yeah, it is that sense of loss of
Yeah. Sorry about that, we're back. We're back. I don't know what happened there.
Oh, we just lost sound. Okay.
So
I'm not sure when we lost it, but I'll just do a quick summary around the need for it to be an ongoing process.
I think people can read, so that's good too.
Always helps when you have some dialogue in front of you, and that you're getting clear, and you're working on your culture as well as the operational efficiencies as well, and getting clear about that, and really focusing on the people. And finally, so I've got one more slide, I think, before we go into some Q&A.
Right,
just
there we
some
go.
quick tips around, what is it that leaders can be doing. So having targeted communications that cover the facts, talk about your own experiences, connect with people on an emotional level, empathise, but also bring on the challenge, the opportunity. Inspire people, what is it that what can this mean for individuals in the new world, and work with HR and other peers to support each other through that change, and leverage champion networks to be really driving the change. So it's not just the leaders, but employees are being empowered to create the future they want as well.
So passion, inspiration, learning and all of those things, they all stem from the ability to an understanding of where you want to head, and to be part of that journey. If you can't and you're not engaged, then it's very hard to be inspired, I take it.
Yeah, it does come down to the individual to be accountable for how they respond to change. And I think you see this, not just in the workplace, in life. Are you going to be an active part of it? Sometimes, you need to sit back. Sometimes people don't want to be actively, constantly thinking about the future and where they're going to go. But I guess, having the awareness in yourself around where you're at in that change curve and the choices that you make, and that when you are choosing to stay with an organisation, you're choosing your own engagement as well.
Yeah, okay. Okay, all right. So that ends the formal part of the presentation. We're going to make this presentation available, so if you want to share it with your peers, that's obviously something we'd love you to do. But we're open to any questions. We'll probably hand it back to Jessica for a moment.
Thanks, David and Angela. So if anyone has any questions, I will unmute all your microphones. Also, feel free, if you don't have access to a microphone or you wish to type, there is a chat box where you can type any questions.
See, now we can hear you.
Excellent.
Okay.
unless they've muted themselves.
Ah,
Feel
that's
free to
okay.
unmute yourself.
Thank you, Donna.
So I wonder, David, you're obviously in industry and you're seeing the change that's occurring in councils. What are some of the challenges that you find, councillors and leaders or people in the workforce are finding with the changes that are going on?
I think they felt a bit disenfranchised through the way the change came about, in particular around the mergers, and that is that it's an imposed process. And I think that's probably the biggest challenge, and I think it's about the leaders of the organisation transitioning through that and making it an empowered process from what would be an imposed process.
Yeah, it's always difficult to have to respond to something you've had no control over, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
So I guess the sooner that you recognise I can't influence the outcome, this is the outcome, and move on, I guess the better, but it's recognising that and adjusting to it that's difficult, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. So I suppose in the absence of any questions, what we'll do is, as I said, we'll make this presentation available, and you can use the PowerPoint presentation as you see fit, share it with your peers, particularly those organisations that are going through the significant change. And we did focus a lot on mergers, but it equally is applicable to environmental change or social change that impacts on communities.
Technology.
Yeah, technological change and the like. I mean, we know that Northern Beaches it went through a significant environmental event recently, and that's going to have a huge impact on the local community.
Just the other point to make as well is that if you do have any questions, sometimes people don't always feel comfortable asking questions in an open forum, but if you do have any questions or comments, please feel free to email them to Jessica, and we'd be more than happy to respond to those one-on-one as well.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you very much. We're going to log off now, and thank you for your attendance.
Thank you.
Thanks, David and Angela, and thanks, everyone.
Thank you.